Right, good afternoon everyone. This is going to be a video on how to make a Valheim style map with Voxel plugin 2. Um, the goal is to get something like this. So it's going to be circular. It's going to have, the deep biomes, deep north hashlands, and it's going to, show how you can separate things so that like the planes only spawn in a band. So let's go. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to set up a material. And this is just going to take a voxel metadata, color metadata, and paint it on the terrain. This just makes it so that we can see quite easily what we are doing. So I'm going to create a new voxel color metadata for this as well. And plonk that into the base color and apply it. Save that and close. Now, so I've created the material and the metadata. I'm going to create a graph. This is going to be a 2D graph, and so it's going to be called a height graph, and I'm just going to call it Valheim test. Drag it into the world, move it to the origin, and let's open the graph. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my material. What did I even call it? Oh, let me just grab it like that. There we go. So now I've got my graph in the world and it's got the material on it I want. Let's make the terrain show. So I'm going to make a 2D box and I want it to be a large map. So this is going to be like 4 million. And it's going to prompt me to add my material to the voxel mega material, which I'm going to say yes to. And I'm also going to make this a parameter in case I want to change it later on. So now in my world I have voxel height graph, and you can just see it's just a plane at 0 height at the moment. So let's make it not 0 height. Let's get the color metadata that we want. Convert the pin, right click and convert the pin to linear color. And then just to show how it works, I can just bang that there. He says, and the terrain is now green. I think that's happening outside of the atmosphere of the default level because it's a very big map. Let's try and zoom out a bit. Yeah, it's a very big map. So actually I'm probably going to remove the clouds and the sky atmosphere. No, I don't want to remove that one. Volumetric cloud, I want rid of that. That's giving me an awful colour there. Which ones do I need to get rid of? Not that. Not that. Not that. Not that. Oh, I guess everything else is staying then. Oh, the sky sphere, surely that wants to go. Yeah. We'll see. Okay, let's make the terrain a bit noisy first. So we'll do get position 2D. This is just going to be basic noise for our terrain. I'm just going to use the standard settings because it's not, well, I'll up the amplitude a bit. Okay, so now we have a voxel terrain. When it loads to load 0, you can see it's quite bumpy and quite big. Let's make it a bit more noisy though. There we go, that looks better. And it's big. We'll see, maybe I've made it too big. My last demonstration was not this big. Right, so the first thing we want to do is we want to make the terrain a sphere rather than, yeah, it's too big. Do you know what, let's just knock it down to 1 million. This will feel better when we start actually doing stuff. We're going to make it a circle. So how we're going to do that is we're going to do get position 3D. So what this is doing is it's not get position 2D, sorry. The position of each voxel, the graph runs for the position of each voxel. So what I'm going to do here is get the distance from the world origin 0, 0 to the local voxel, and I'm going to take this buffer of data, so for each point it'll run through this logic, and this height splitter node is a great node. What it does is you put in a height here and it splits the buffer into different streams. So the height is 0 here, so if the distance was negative, well, it can't be negative, so let's make it more sensible. The diameter of my circle is going to be about 800,000 because my terrain is the size of a million. So what will come out of strength 1 is if the distance, this value here, is below 800,000, this strength 1 will have a 1 and strength 2 will have a 0. But if the position of the voxel is greater than 800,000, strength 2 will have a value of 1 and strength 1 will have a value of 0. More or less. Might be a little bit more complicated than that. So what I'm going to say is this is my outer ring. So I'm going to promote it to a variable. This is essentially a mask I can use on my noise. So for my terrain noise, I'm going to interpolate this value. I can just lerp it, I think. Lerp with my outer ring as a mask. And so if that's 1, I want my terrain to fall minus 10,000 and into there. There you go. So we can see now that the terrain just doesn't go past the circle. This is a very harsh cutoff though, and we can make it smoother by manipulating this fall off. So I'll make this 5,000. Maybe I'll make it a bit more. I don't know. Sure, let's make it like 20,000, just so it's a nice smooth fall off. And you'll see how this works with the color and stuff later. I mean, the essential of all the work we're doing here is we're using these values that we're creating as masks. That's the long and short of all we're about to do here. The first thing I'll do is I'll manipulate this color buffer to make everything below 0 blue, color of water. And then we'll start to see the shapes of the islands here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lerp this buffer. Green and blue, those are our two colors at the moment. And the alpha is going to be the outer ring. That makes everything outside of the circle blue, but we're also going to add what we want to do here is we want to take this and we want to split it. No, what I want to do here is I want to take this value, this terrain noise. Actually, I'm going to take this one, promote it to a local variable. So this is my final terrain noise. Any other work I'll do before this variable is created. And then I want to get that noise. And so it's a huge number. It's it's all of the terrain height across the map. But what I want to do is I want to clamp it. Well, I want to remap it first. I want to flip it so that it's a positive value if it's underwater. Yeah. So my in is, it doesn't matter if it's 0 or 1 because my alpha it's only important if it's between 0 and 1. So in min and in max can be clamped, and then these I just want to reverse. And then I can add this to the outer ring and plug it in here. And then what we see is any values below 0, and I'll paint it blue. So I've got my separation between the land and the sea, essentially. And that's what this float buffer is telling is a mask for. So I can use this stuff in a lot of places. At the moment I'm using it to color the terrain, but I could use it to swap between materials. And to some extent you can use it to drive the noise that's being created. But let's do some more stuff first. Let's add in another biome. No, let's not add in another biome. Let us add in the extremes at the poles. So I'm just going to take this and I am going to comment it and say outer ring. Then I'm going to copy it all. That's a bad idea. And I'm going to rename this to Deep North. And to calculate the Deep North, what I need to do is I need to warp the position a little bit, because I don't want a perfect circle, I want an oval. So I'm going to take the x and I'm going to multiply it by 1.3. And I am going to break this open and plug it in. That can more or less stay the same, and then again, anything outside becomes the Deep North. And then we just go down here and we extend this loop. I'm going to drag this out of the way because it's going to get quite long at the end of it. Now the last thing we want to do is make sure anything below 0 is water. So the loop is going to come out of the green, and again we're going to turn that into green and going to get our Deep North. Now what you can see is it's painted the top and the bottom of our terrain in the same shape as the Valheim terrains. At the moment we haven't given it a colour, so it's black, but we've got both of the directions doing something. Now, for now, they're both going to be white. How do I even do that? There we go. They're both white. There we go. But let's break it up so that we can have our ashlands down south. Now, the way we want to do this, it is not as straightforward as just taking the other strength. We need to remake this. Well, no, we don't actually need to remake this. We just need to change it a little bit. So what we need to say is that if we need to do a select node, and this stays 1 and goes into Deep North if the position of the voxel is greater than 0. That's going to, separate above the equator from below the equator. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do greater or equal to 0. That gives us a bool that we can plug in, and there we go. The southern one disappeared. And similarly, we can do another select. Can we just... Is that going to work for us? Let's find out. It's a local variable. Ashlands. Extend our lerp. I'll do it after this one. I've done it after this one because we're going to modify where our mountains are appearing. As you know, we have mountains appearing just at high points in the map as well. But the way this lerp is working is you're overwriting the data that came before it. And I don't want mountains in my ashlands. So it doesn't matter how high the terrain is, I don't want snow in my ashlands. But there we go, we have our basic separation. And now let's do the height aspect that I mentioned. So that's very similar to what we've done before. Based on the terrain height, we need to switch between the green and the white, essentially. So how do we do that? We do a height splitter out of the final, out of the final terrain noise, yeah, sure. How high should our mountains be? Let's go for 20, anything above 20,000, so we know that we take the mask out of the strength 2. Mountain height. Okay. And what we can just do is we can add that to our deep north mask. So where it's either deep north or mountain height, give us the white colouring. Did that not work? Oh dear. Is my mask was too high? I do that occasionally. So there you go. We have mountains around the map, but also in the deep north. And I'll do one quick demonstration of more biomes, and then we'll call it a day for now. So now what I want to do is I want to add in the Black Forest. So we have two options for something that is not high or in one of the poles. We have the option of meadows or Black Forest. So I'm going to generate just a new node, a new noise, because I don't want to use the same noise as the rest of the terrain. 2D advanced noise. I'm going to make it. I'm going to scramble it a little bit. Double clicked and opened Visual Studios. Bear with me. There we go. And the noise value, output to value, somewhere between minus 10,000 and 10,000 basically. But we can just split it straight down the middle and then we'll get a 50-50 split. Height splitter again. Don't even need any fall off, although we might. We'll see. Let's promote it to a variable. This one can be our meadows. And this one can be our Black Forest. And then it's just a matter of adding it onto our lerp. So let's go for green and dark green. And our alpha in this case is going to be our Black Forest. And there we go, easy peasy. If I change the seed on the terrain, the whole terrain changes. But the biomes will have actually stayed the same, more or less. Apart from the mountains and stuff like that, because further on in the lerp, the mountains is important. If we change the seed on the biome splitter, so we'll call this biome split. If we change the seed on this, we get a different placing of Black Forest and meadows. And that's basically it. It gets more complicated. So there are areas where we don't want, for example, at the moment the origin where the player would spawn is Black Forest. We don't want that. And all you would essentially do is you would create another ring of a different height and use that as a mask on the noise. So earlier on, rather than lowering the terrain, you'd use the mask to set the terrain above ground. And again, you could say here that only do Black Forest if it's, outside of the first circle that you make. And again, for plains and swamp, you would basically just repeat the process. Make another biome split node, unless you want to reuse the same one. And then, add it to the lerp. Essentially, you probably want to do things in order, so you want to do your meadows and your Black Forest first, because they're going to be closest to the origin. Then you want to do your plains and swamp. And then these ones that are slightly more complex and actually override the others in some area, you want to do after the other biomes. And then the last one, of course, is your water. And again, this lerping and changing of data is something you will use in a bunch of different contexts. So you've got your blended materials, which takes an alpha. So if you wanted different materials on the terrains, you'd do that. Later on, when you're adding foliage and you want to change the color of the foliage based on the terrain, this is exactly how you would do it. You would be building a color buffer and you would be reading that in your foliage material. So in PCG, you would query the metadata, grab the metadata, and probably plug it in as per instance custom data on your mesh spawner to say, okay, I'm in the meadows. my foliage needs to be a bit greener, and that's how you would do that. The more complex advanced tasks is figuring out how to get your terrains to be different styles, because at the moment we only have this one advanced noise for our terrain, so it doesn't matter if you're in the meadows or the black forest, it's going to be just as bumpy when you get right down to the ground level. Now that stuff can be changed, but I'll cover that in a future video. And let me know what you want to see, what I can show you, and thanks for watching. Have a great day.